There's a fear so primal, so deeply rooted in the human psyche, that it's haunted us for centuries, being buried alive. The sheer terror of waking up, trapped beneath layers of earth, pounding helplessly against the unyielding wood of a coffin, while the air grows thinner with each desperate breath. It sounds like the stuff of nightmares. But what if I told you it's more than just a bad dream? Throughout history, there have been whispers, stories passed down, accounts too chilling to ignore, tales of people presumed dead, only to awaken in their graves. These stories are disturbingly real. So today we dive into the eerie reality behind one of humanity's greatest fears. A reality that proves that sometimes the truth is far more horrifying than fiction. For centuries, being buried alive was a terrifying reality. The line between life and death, as it turns out, was not always as clear as we like to believe. In 1786, a chilling discovery was made in Paris. During the demolition of a centuries-old cemetery, Professor Tours, an observer at the site, uncovered evidence that would disturb even the most hardened of souls. As the graves were unearthed, he noticed something unsettling. Many of the skeletons bore marks that suggested movement within their coffins. They had clawed, twisted, and fought against their confinement. These weren't just the remains of the dead. They were the tragic victims of a horrifying mistake. People believed to be gone, laid to rest far too soon. However, the tragedy wasn't confined to distant history or foreign lands. In 19th century Kentucky, a young woman named Octavia Smith Hatcher experienced a fate that would haunt her small town for generations. After losing her infant son, grief consumed her. She fell into a deep coma and was soon pronounced dead. In the sweltering summer heat, her burial was swift. But soon after, something strange began to happen. Others in the town fell into a similar comatose state, but miraculously woke up days later. Doctors speculated it was sleeping sickness, possibly caused by the bite of a tsetse fly. Haunted by the strange turn of events, Octavia's husband demanded her body be exhumed. What he found shattered him. The inside of her coffin was marked by desperate scratches. Her fingers, bloodied and worn to the bone, were a testament to her frantic struggle to escape. Octavia had been buried alive, her final moments spent in unimaginable terror. Stories like these ripples through time, each more unsettling than the last. In 1817, John Snart chronicled the story of a man named Corniche in his book, The Source of Horror. After succumbing to a fever, Corniche was laid to rest. But as the gravediggers lingered that evening, faint groans rose from the freshly turned earth. They rushed to uncover him, only to find he had died once again, this time for good. His body bore the marks of his final, desperate fight for survival. His sister, so horrified by his fate, made a grim request. Upon her death, her head was to be severed to ensure she would never face the same fate. These fears weren't without reason. Back then, the tools to distinguish between life and death were crude at best. A cold body, a still heart, these signs were often mistaken as the end. But today, we know better. Severe hypothermia, for instance, can lower body temperatures to the point where life signs are almost undetectable. Lethargic sleep or certain medical conditions can render the heart's beat so faint that even a trained ear might miss it. It wasn't uncommon for victims of asphyxiation, poisoning, lightning strikes, or extreme trauma to appear lifeless when they were, in fact, still clinging to life. In response to these horrifying mistakes, some cultures imposed a waiting period. In parts of Europe, funerals were delayed by at least 3 days after death, giving any faint spark of life a chance to reignite. But practicality often interfered. Before refrigeration, summer heat could cause bodies to decay quickly, forcing impoverished families to bury their dead sooner than they might have wished. For the poor, the choice was a grim one: endure the unbearable stench of decay or risk burying someone alive. It's tempting to think that such nightmares are relics of the past, banished by modern medicine. Today, doctors have advanced diagnostic tools, from brain scans to heart monitors, to confirm death with near certainty. And yet, every so often, headlines remind us that the fear hasn't completely disappeared. Stories of people waking up in morgues or discovered alive just before burial continue to surface. Even today, with all our medical advancements, mistakes can still lead to devastating consequences. In the Brazilian city of Riachão das Neves, 37-year-old Rosângela Almeida Santos was pronounced dead from sepsis. Her family buried her, grieving her loss, until 11 days later, horrifying news reached them. People near the cemetery reported hearing screams coming from her grave. When her relatives rushed to exhume her coffin, they uncovered a nightmare. Rosangela's hands and forehead were bloodied and bruised, evidence of her desperate attempts to escape. The nails on the coffin lid were loosened, and her body was still warm. She had fought with everything she had, but no one came in time. Every so often, these grim stories take a surprising turn. In 1993, South African man Sipho William Mdletshe was declared dead after a car accident and sent to the morgue. Placed in a metal box, he spent several days unconscious before miraculously waking up. He managed to call for help and was released, but his ordeal wasn't over. His fiancée, who had survived the accident, refused to see him again, convinced he had returned as a zombie. As shocking as these modern cases are, the Middle Ages had their own terrifying response to people returning from supposed death. Back then, waking up after being buried wasn't seen as a miracle. It was seen as evidence of vampirism. Such unfortunates were often executed, their heads cut off to prevent them from rising again to harm others. However, not every story of premature burial ends in tragedy or superstition. In 1937, France, 19-year-old Angelo Hayes was buried after a car accident seemingly took his life. But his father's recent decision to insure Angelo for a large sum of money raised suspicions. An insurance investigation led to Angelo's body being exhumed, and to everyone's astonishment, his heart was still faintly beating. He recovered and later turned his ordeal into innovation, designing escapable coffins for those fearing a similar fate. But here's the question that you should be asking. What would you do if you found yourself trapped in a coffin, buried under 6 feet of earth, with no one coming to help? The very thought feels suffocating, trapped in darkness, surrounded by earth, with time slipping away faster than your breath. In Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, where the protagonist Beatrix punches her way out of a coffin and digs herself to freedom. But in reality, escaping the grave is far more grueling than any movie could show. On Mythbusters, the team attempted to recreate Beatrix's harrowing escape. What they found was sobering. Breaking through the lid of a coffin required over 600 powerful punches, an unimaginable feat of endurance. Even then, they only managed to claw their way up about 2 feet, a fraction of the standard 6-foot burial depth. But why 6 feet? It's not just tradition. In 1655, during the height of the bubonic plague in England, London's mayor mandated graves be dug 6 feet deep to curb the disease's spread. The practice stuck, and even today, many countries consider it the standard for burial depth. That thick layer of earth, while meant to protect the living, makes survival for the buried nearly impossible. But nearly isn't the same as never. Experts agree there's a slim chance to escape if you can stay calm. Panic is your worst enemy. Inside a sealed coffin, oxygen only lasts about 40 minutes, and every frantic breath burns through it faster. The key to survival is controlling your fear. First, assess your situation. Feel the space around you and determine your position. If you have clothing or fabric, pull it over your head and secure it tightly. This makeshift mask will protect your lungs from dirt and debris when the time comes to dig. Next, focus on the lid above you. The center is its weakest point. Use your feet, not your hands, to strike it as hard as you can. If you manage to break through, dirt will begin to pour in. Don't panic. Use your hands to move the dirt into the space around you, creating room to maneuver. Keep pushing the lid with your head and shoulders, all the while clawing your way upward. Row through the earth like you're swimming, pushing it behind you until you feel the sweet relief of air on your skin. It's a race against time, strength, and suffocation. But if you make it out, the first breath of fresh air will taste like a miracle. You've survived the unimaginable, and with the earth at your back, you'll celebrate your new second birthday, your rebirth into the world above. But for some, the thought of being buried alive isn't a fear, it's a thrill. There are those who willingly entomb themselves for hours or even days, chasing an experience they describe as emotionally transcendent, unlike anything else. They claim it offers a profound perspective on life and an escape into silence that the surface world can't provide. However, not all of these ventures end with enlightenment. In 2011, a 35-year-old Russian man decided to spend an entire day buried underground. With the help of a friend, he climbed into a coffin he had prepared himself, complete with a breathing tube, a bottle of water, and a mobile phone. The friend sealed him into his grave and left, assured by the man's confidence that everything was under control. For a while, it seemed like it was. Hours later, the man called his friend to say he was fine. But when morning came, things had taken a tragic turn. A sudden heavy rain during the night had blocked the air tube, cutting off his oxygen supply. By the time his friend returned to unearth him, the man had suffocated. What began as a reflective experiment ended in a horrifying death. Despite such risks, these so-called stage funerals are often carried out with elaborate precautions. Enthusiasts and professionals in the field, some even humorously dubbed zombies, claim to have safely undergone the experience multiple times, some exceeding a dozen. One notable example is the Russian blogger Alexander Gambarov, also known as Gabar, who took the internet along for the ride. Equipped with a camera inside his coffin, he live-streamed the entire ordeal to his audience. When he emerged, shaken but alive, he described a whirlwind of emotions. There was awe, discomfort, even a strange sense of peace. But what struck him most was the joy of simply standing on solid ground again, breathing fresh air, and feeling the weight of the world replaced by lightness. Now we're going to take a look at what it's actually like to be buried alive. So start taking shallow breaths and continue watching till the end. The panic takes over. Waking up in complete darkness, realizing you're trapped, your body's first reaction isn't survival, it's panic. Your breathing becomes rapid, your heart races, and adrenaline floods your system. But that burst of energy comes at a steep price. If you're in a standard coffin, you've got about 800 liters of air, enough for only a few hours if you stay calm. But panic, that's a fast track to using up your precious oxygen. Controlled breathing could mean the difference between a fighting chance and an early end. The darkness becomes familiar. It's strange to think about, but your eyes will eventually adjust to the dark. That might sound like good news, but the bad news? It means you've been trapped long enough for your body to adapt. In 2005, 3 boys in Pakistan were buried alive after an earthquake. By the time they were rescued, their eyes had grown so accustomed to the pitch-black underground that sunlight was unbearable. The adjustment may help you orient yourself, but it's a grim reminder of how long you've been entombed. Exhaustion creeps in. The urge to fight your way out is overwhelming. Instinct takes over, and before you know it, you're punching, kicking, clawing, doing anything to escape. But this desperate struggle drains you quickly. Your muscles burn, your strength fades, and you're left with nothing but exhaustion. Worse, all that effort burns oxygen, accelerating the very thing you're trying to prevent. Staying calm might be the only way to conserve what little energy you have. The heat becomes unbearable. Trapped in a confined space, your body heat has nowhere to go. In 2008, a Chinese construction worker accidentally buried alive in a ditch described the ordeal as hot and suffocating. The rising temperature adds another layer of torment to an already dire situation, turning the coffin into a stifling oven. Dehydration takes hold. If the heat doesn't get you, dehydration might. In 2010, Chilean miners spent 69 days underground after a cave-in, rationing 10 bottles of clean water between 25 men. As harrowing as that sounds, if you're trapped underground for a long period of time, you need to find a source of water within a week, preferably sooner. If not, you'll likely die of dehydration before the loss of air kills you. The clock is ticking. Time is not on your side when you're buried alive. Every second becomes more precious as the odds stack against you. So, how much time do you really have? Experts at Popular Science crunch the numbers. In a standard coffin, you've got about 820 liters of air to work with. If you can stay calm and take slow, shallow breaths, that air might last around 5.5 hours. But panic is your biggest enemy here. Hyperventilating speeds up the process, replacing your breathable oxygen with deadly carbon dioxide. Once that ratio shifts, it's game over. The crushing weight. Let's say you somehow manage to punch through the lid of your coffin. What comes next might be even worse. On top of you is 6 feet of densely packed earth, weighing roughly 1,000 pounds. That weight doesn't just pin you down, it presses on your chest so hard that your ribs could crack and your lungs won't have the room to expand. Even the strongest willpower can't fight the crushing reality of thousands of pounds of soil bearing down on your fragile body. The danger of being saved. Ironically, if you're buried under rubble and manage to survive long enough for rescue, that victory might be short-lived. According to Dr. Tejasri Shah of Doctors Without Borders, being trapped for days can lead to crush syndrome. When the pressure is finally released, toxins from muscle breakdown flood your system, overwhelming your kidneys and heart. Without immediate medical attention, the relief of being freed can turn into unbearable agony, or worse. Dirt everywhere. Even if you break through the coffin and somehow face the earth above, the struggle isn't over. Packed dirt finds its way into every crevice, your mouth, nose, even your eyes. Anthony Britton, a daredevil who once buried himself alive as a stunt, described the horrifying reality. It's pitch black, the dampness is overwhelming, and soil gets everywhere, up your nose, in your mouth, in your eyes. For many, that suffocating, gritty taste would be their final memory. It's a grim scenario, and one most of us would rather not think about. But the human spirit has faced, and sometimes survived, the impossible. What other unimaginable situations can a person endure, and how do they overcome them? Let us know your thoughts below, and if this story kept you hooked, don't forget to like the video and hit that notification bell. Stay curious, because the world's darkest mysteries are always waiting to be uncovered.